Yeah, so probably a really pivotal point in my life and what set me down the pathway that I'm on now was my discharge from the military. And so after 14 years and the back half of that, or the last 5 years spent with special operations, pretty busy operational tempo there, I'd gotten out and I'd been looking forward to this period. I'd seen discharge as being only a positive thing for me. I'd be home more with my young family, had three little kids at the time, three young boys. And so my wife had been pretty much single parenting them for the last 5 years of my army career. I'd seen this great potential for work as a civilian doctor, this increase in income. I doubled my income as a civilian doctor. And despite all this stuff looking fantastic on paper, I really started to struggle in that first 6 to 12 months, particularly post discharge, when I started to reintegrate in the civilian workforce and got my first civilian doctor job out of the army. I was really struggling, and I'd suffered this, with hindsight, a massive loss of identity, a huge loss of purpose. My pace of life had slowed down significantly. With hindsight, I'd been pretty much running on pure stress hormones for that 5 period. And like so many first responders, you don't know that that's happened. You recalibrate, and that's your new normal. And it's not until you do slow down. And so with all that came this, I'd been dislocated from my tribe, if you like, these people that surrounded me in the military role, who could truly empathize with my experiences, because we'd often shared experiences such as the combat environment, combat casualties, loss of teammates. These blokes had either been there or they'd had something similar enough to be able to viscerally associate with that and empathize. And I think there was a powerful social support that came from being around people who truly understood you. And I lost that when I transitioned back into civilian life, and found myself intensely lonely despite being surrounded by people. I just couldn't. I felt like they were a different species, or I was a different species to them, and just couldn't relate. I couldn't find common ground, and that left me. And I think this is a common experience with transitioning military members, police, ambulance, fire. All of these first response communities are pretty unique. And I think moving out of there is a real dislocation from tribe and can leave people feeling really lonely. And that kicked off my deep interest in resilience, which led to what became the Resilient Shield project. Basically looking back and thinking, well, why am I struggling now when on paper everything looks so much better? How is it that all of us could stay so resilient in this environment that, with hindsight, was so stressful and punctuated by these significant traumas? How is it that we stayed functioning at an elite level throughout all of that? And then all of a sudden there's so much reduction in stress in my life as a civilian, in that absolute stress of deploying, of being in combat, of shot at and whatever else. So all of that was gone. I was safer than ever, and theoretically the stress had gone, but I was starting to struggle. And so I started to look at what were these factors. How can I rebuild them? And that sort of set me on this trajectory that I'm still on now, 8+ years later, just with this deep interest in not only that transition period and how we might do it better, but taking that step back while people are still in military or first responder environments. How can we raise this awareness and optimize these people in those environments for better longevity, but also to prepare them better for that transition out, so they don't fall into that dark phase that a lot of people do when they transition.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Dan. It's awesome.